Good morning, baseball fans, and welcome back to Dan's Vintage Baseball PC. Do not be fooled by the fancy name. It's just me and some friends talking about baseball cards. And today's a very, very special episode. Today we talk about the 1948 Boston Braves, a team very special to me for a number of reasons, but also special to a very special person in my life. My Uncle Ralph, on January 15, 2024, will be turning 100 years old. 100 glorious years. My late mother, bless her soul, absolutely adored her youngest sister, Ruth Burns. And Ruth Burns married Ralph Nardone and lived a wonderful life. Ruth Burns, bless her soul, was adored by everyone, including me. And Ralph, who grew up in Westerly, Rhode Island, was a Braves fan because if you were from New England, you were either Red Sox or Braves, and the Braves were the underdogs. And Ralph was a fan of the underdog Braves. But in 1948, they were not underdogs. They were National League champions. And you like to think of the Braves in 1948 as a team that came out of nowhere, but they really weren't. The 1947 Braves were a really good team. Both Spahn and Sane won 20 games that year. And third baseman Bob Elliott was, in fact, the MVP in 1947 of the National League. And pure hitter Tommy Holmes, the outfielder, led the National League in hits in 1947. So they were a pretty good team coming into 48. They were managed by Billy Southworth, who had won 2 World Series with the Cardinals earlier in the decade. And they added some parts. Left fielder Jeff Heath, who was a solid hitter, but a little bit of a flake, had overstayed his welcomes in both Cleveland and with the St. Louis Browns, and was brought in to play left field for the Braves and had a fine season in 1948. They also brought up a couple of really impactful rookies. One was the shortstop Alvin Dark, and the other was a pitcher named Vern Bickford, both of whom had tremendous seasons in 1948. So the 48 Braves were a veteran team who achieved what maybe wasn't expected, but wasn't totally surprising. It didn't start out that way, however. Braves, in their first 7 games, were 1-6. But they started, as I said, they were a veteran team. They started playing better, and they got up to about 500 by midseason. They had a terrific July, putting them in the pennant race. And unfortunately, in August, the second baseman veteran Eddie Stanky, who had also been acquired from 1947 from the Brooklyn Dodgers, broke his ankle. And also, center fielder Jeff Russell had a heart condition, and both of them missed significant time in August. And as a result, the team faded a little bit, but resurged in September. September of 48 for the Braves was a glorious time. Early in the month, Jeff Heath, who had been acquired, as I said, hit a big home run to put them back in first place, and they stayed in first place. Spahn and Sane pitched frequently in September, and they were joined by a fairly obscure but important pickup in August. The Philadelphia A's released Nels Potter. Nels Potter came on as a key member of the pitching staff, won 5 games and saved 3 down the stretch. And between Potter and Spahn and Sane, they soared in September and finished the season 5.5 games ahead. Won the pennant, faced the Cleveland Indians in the World Series. So this is a baseball card show, so let's start looking at some baseball cards. This is a 47 to 66 exhibits. This is the 1948 Braves pennant picture. Wonderful card, PSA 4. Happy to have it. Has all the key members in it. But when you talk about the Braves and baseball cards, you got to start out with the pitchers. And of course, the main pitcher was Hall of Famer Warren Spahn, who won 363 games in his career. I believe he only won 17 that year, but obviously a main member of the staff. This is the 1948 Bowman card, which is called his rookie, even though he came up much earlier than that. This is the 49 Bowman, a beautiful red card that I've showed on this channel before. Spahn was, of course, co-ace in 1948 with the wonderful Johnny Sain, strong right-handed pitcher who had won 20 games in 47 and again won 20 games in 48. Went on to appear for the Yankees in the World Series in the early 50s. In fact, won 2 World Series titles with the Yankees. Johnny Sain. We'll come back to him a little bit later. The key rookie that was brought up was Vern Bickford, who won 11 games that year. Bickford went on to have a pretty solid career with the Braves. In 1950, I believe he won 19 games and pitched a no-hitter that year. So Bickford was a solid pitcher. The pitcher that I mentioned before, who was kind of obscure, who they picked up, he was a veteran. I believe he was 36 years old. Nels Potter, who had pitched for Philadelphia and the Browns. Potter actually was the ace of the staff for the Browns in 1944 when they went to the World Series. Sort of wore out his well. He went back to Philadelphia, sort of wore out his welcome and got released. This is a 1941. It's a double play, right? Yeah, it's a double play with Nels Potter for Philadelphia. He's here on this with Benny McCoy, who I can do an entire show about, but we won't talk about Mr. McCoy today. So Nels Potter was a veteran pitcher, had pitched a number of years, as I said, for St. Louis. So it's possible Southworth knew him because Southworth was managing the St. Louis Cardinals at the time that Potter was on the St. Louis Browns. This I picked up a 1946-47 Propaganda Montiel. I love these cards. They're Cuban issues. And this one, I picked this up off of eBay for an extremely reasonable price for these extremely rare cards. This is pictures Potter on the St. Louis Browns. And it's just a wonderful card. The back is in Spanish, which I, of course, can't read, but it says Nelson Thomas Potter, pitcher. So Braves also had some veterans in the infield. In 1947, they picked up Frank Buck McCormick, who had been the 1940 National League MVP and I believe is a 7 or 8-time All-Star for the Reds. But by 48 was sort of playing out the string. I think he retired at the end of the season. So Buck McCormick, I have his 3 cards from the play ball set. This is the 1939 play ball Frank Buck McCormick on the Cincinnati Reds. This is the 1940 play ball with Frank Buck McCormick on the Reds. And this glorious colorized photo from the 1941 play ball set that I've shown on the channel previously of Frank Buck McCormick. He played, I don't know, I guess about 70 or 80 games, but the real first baseman for the team who played primarily was Earl Torgeson. Earl Torgeson did have a really solid career, played 15 seasons. About the first half of his career was for the Braves. Solid player. He did end up later on playing for the Phillies and some other teams. Here's his 1954 Bowman with a Phillies uniform, but most happy with this card, which is the 1950 Drakes, a rare card that I also acquired off of eBay for a not inexpensive amount of money. Earl Torgeson with the you can see him with the stretch there, wearing the Braves uniform, and the beautiful patch on his shoulder there. So that's the first baseman. The second baseman was Eddie Stanky. As I said, Eddie Stanky got hurt and only played about 70 or 80 games that year. His backup was a gentleman by the name of Sibby Sisti, and Sibby Sisti played for the Braves for quite a number of years. He came up previously in one of my videos because he was the reason Warren Spahn ended up on the Braves instead of the Red Sox. And so I got this picture. It's a news issue picture. It's Eddie Stanky and Sibby Sisti. And the caption reads, Stanky and Sisti confer. Eddie Stanky left and Sibby Sisti conferred at Braves Field yesterday. Prior to the Braves-Dodgers doubleheader, Sisti is filling in at second base for Stanky while he recovers from an ankle injury received in a game with the Dodgers July 6th. So there's Stanky and Sisti. Stanky, of course, went on to play for the Giants and then was a manager for many years. The shortstop, as I said before, was Alvin Dark, who had a very, very long career in baseball. Alvin Dark ultimately was traded to the Giants later on in the 50s, was on the 1951 Giants that went to the World Series, and also was the manager of the 1962 Giants who won the pennant. And Alvin Dark ultimately got his World Series reign as a manager of the Oakland A's in 1974. So a lot of World Series appearances, but it took him a while to get his ring. This is the 1949 Bowman. This is a rookie card of Alvin Dark, a glorious red-colored card that I purchased from a friend on Twitter a couple of years ago. Love this card. Also got in an auction a few months ago, certified Alvin Dark autograph photo with, of course, the Braves team. After the 1948 season, 49 was kind of a disappointment, and I believe it was 1950. The Braves traded both Dark and Stanky to the Giants for outfielder Sid Gordon, who was a solid player, but it kind of took the heart out of the infield that had gotten them to the pennant in 48. The third baseman for the Braves, Bob Elliott, who won the 1947 MVP and was a stalwart for the Braves for many years, should get more consideration for the Hall of Fame because his numbers are clearly there, but he was also a leader. Bob Elliott was the 1947 MVP. This is his 1948 rookie card because there weren't many cards produced during the war. This is number one in the set in 48 because it said voted 1947's most valuable player, batted .317. He had been acquired from the Pirates and went on to be pennant winner and star with the Braves. This is his 1948-49 Leaf card, which, as you can see, got a 4. It's a beautiful, beautiful front, very nicely centered, sharp corners and everything, but a little bit of schmutz on the back here. Got the grade a little bit lower, but wonderful Leaf card from Bob Elliott. Now, the outfield was anchored by the great Tommy Holmes. Tommy Holmes in 1945 had a year for the ages, which unfortunately didn't earn him the MVP, but he finished second. He led the league in virtually everything: hits, home runs, batting average, on-base percentage, total base, everything. If you look at his stat line, he's pretty much all dark black ink because Tommy Holmes had a fantastic 1945. By 48, he was still a good player. 47, he led the league in hits. Got a nice little selection of Tommy Holmes cards and a photo. This is the 49 Holmes. He's not in the 48 Bowman set, unfortunately. This another one of these beautiful red cards. Tommy Holmes with, of course, the fantastic arm patch there, which is also in a beautiful red. Holmes also was still on the Braves in 1950. He actually went on to become the manager of the Braves for a short period of time. This is his 1950 Bowman. And in 1951, Topps produced a game card set. And this is the 1951 51 Topps Tommy Holmes. This is the one where it says that he's the new manager of Hartford in the Eastern League. There were two versions of this card. One has him as a player and one has him as the manager. This is the manager, which is the more rare version. Also picked up recently a press photo of Tommy Holmes. Also, beautiful swing. He had the great left-handed swing in the Braves uniform at, I believe this is Braves Field. So there you go, Tommy Holmes. Other outfielders, as I mentioned, included the acquired Jeff Heath. Now, Heath did not appear in the World Series. And it's kind of a sad story because Jeff Heath might have been the difference in the 48 World Series. Heath begged off of a game in late September when the Braves had already clinched the pennant. It was a game against the Dodgers, and Southworth put him in the lineup instead. And Heath tried to score from the outfield on a throw from Carl Furillo, the arm, Carl Furillo, who threw him out at home plate, and Heath slid and broke his ankle. I was going to show a picture of this because there is literally a picture of the slide, but the ankle is grossly turned in and not a good picture to see. So not showing that, but I'm just going to show this glorious 1949 Bowman card of Jeff Heath. As I said, wore it as welcome in Cleveland and St. Louis, but came in for the Braves and did quite well. We'll talk about the World Series and why that Jeff Heath not being in the World Series may have actually cost them the win. Another outfielder on the team was Jeff Russell, who I don't have any cards for because Russell had a heart condition, missed the tail end of the 48 season, and then played a little bit in 49 and then retired. He doesn't really have any cards, regular issue cards. But I did come up with this card. It's a 1949 Eureka Sports stamp of Mike McCormick, who was forced into action to become a regular outfielder in the tail end of the 48 season and did play regularly in the World Series. In 1949, however, he was on the Dodgers and won another pennant. 48-49 won 2 pennants as a backup part-time outfielder, Mike McCormick. And then, as I said, I have 2 more items to show. So 48 World Series takes place. First 2 games are in Boston. The first game features Sane against Feller, and the game ends in a 1-0 Boston Braves victory. Sane pitched beautifully. Feller gave up 1 run that is very controversial because I believe it's the 7th inning. Bill Salkeld, who was the backup catcher, actually got the start in that day and drew a walk. He ended up getting, I believe, bunted over to second base, and then they pinch ran Phil Macy, the other catcher, who was about a runner, while the runner was on second base. So Phil Macy comes in. Lou Boudreau, who was the manager of Cleveland and the shortstop, called for a pickoff play. Feller timed it perfectly, threw to second, and he and Boudreau and Feller both insist that Phil Macy was out at second base on the pickoff. Phil Macy was called safe. Here's Phil Macy. And he was later driven in by Tommy Holmes, the sweet swinging outfielder. Drove him in, hit to left field, and that was the only run of the game. Sane pitched a complete game shutout, and I have this photograph signed by Johnny Sane, which is the moment when he is rushed by all of his teammates, having pitched a 1-0 complete game shutout in the first game of the 1948 World Series. You can see Sane's signature up on the top, CAS certified. Wonderful, wonderful picture that captures the glorious victory at the first game of the 1948 World Series. 1948 World Series Game 2, also at Braves Field, was a matchup between 2 future Hall of Famers, Bob Lemon for the Cleveland Indians and Warren Spahn. Lemon got the best of Spahn, but what I got is a ticket, authentic ticket from the 1948 World Series Game 2 at Braves Field. Enter in the first base pavilion. Now, what's special about this ticket for me is that Braves Field now, let me go back to the 1970s when my father drove by Braves Field and I was a little kid and he pointed it out to me. And I've never forgotten that moment. And later on, 2 of my children went to Boston University and graduated. And what's important about that is Braves Field is now known as Nickerson Field, and it is part of the university, Boston University Sports Complex, where they play soccer and field hockey and intramural sports. And the one set of the stands are still there. There's a plaque for Braves Field, but I was on Braves Field when my two of my children in consecutive years graduated from Boston University. which is very, very special for me. And I could feel the history of Braves Field. Now, the Boston Braves won 2 pennants in the 20th century. They won the World Series in 1914, but they hadn't yet begun to play at Braves Field at that point. So 1948 is the only pennant and the only World Series games that ever took place in Braves Field. And after they split game 1 and 2, went to Cleveland for 3 games. Cleveland won games 3 and 4 in historical fashion, because the Cleveland Indians had 2 historical players on their team. Larry Doby, who was the first African-American player in the American League, was signed by Cleveland not too long after Robinson became a Brooklyn Dodger. And Satchel Paige, who came to the Indians in 1948, pitched in the World Series in 1948. I believe he pitched in Game 5. And he's the first African-American pitcher to pitch in the World Series. So Doby, in Game 3, hit a very crucial home run to put the Indians up 2-0, and I believe that was the final score. But that was the first home run ever hit in the World Series by an African-American. And so Game 5 takes place. Nels Potter is called in to start the game, but doesn't do very well. And the Braves are trailing, I believe it was 5-4. And Spahn comes in relief and pitches over 5 innings of relief effectively. And the Braves come back to win the game, scored a lot of runs, as they did that year. And the World Series comes back to Boston. The Braves are trailing 3-2, but they've got 2 games left at home. Game 6 features Bob Lemon. I believe it was either Bickford or Voisell pitched for the Braves, pitched fairly well, but the Braves found themselves down 4-1 in the 8th inning. Put together a rally, a couple of hits, a double, made the score 4-3. Bob Elliott was held at third base. Unfortunately, he might have scored. But the next hitter up, sadly, was not Jeff Heath. It was Mike McCormick, who grounded out to the pitcher, and that was it. So the Braves didn't win the World Series in 1948, but they won the hearts of Boston. They won the hearts of 100-year-old Ralph Nardone, and they created a legacy of winning. A couple of years later, they would sign a Hall of Fame third baseman by the name of Eddie Matthews. A year later, they would sign one of the greatest players in the history of Major League Baseball, Hank Aaron. And by 1957, the Braves were on top of the world. They beat the Yankees to win the World Series in 57. They lost the World Series in 7 games in 1958, and they went to the playoff at the end of the season in 1959, having tied the Dodgers. So the Braves, 48 Braves, were an important team historically. They're certainly an important team for me personally and for my family. They created a legacy, as did Ralph Nardone. Uncle Ralph turning 100 years old is just so unbelievably special to me. And as I said before, our family, particularly my mother, adored the Nardone family. And for me, every time we visited them or they visited us, it was a special occasion. And so, sorry, I get a little choked up here. For me to be able to give this gift to Uncle Ralph on his 100th birthday is very, very special. He had 5 children. I believe he has 20 grandchildren. He has, I don't know how many great-grandchildren. I probably should have gotten that number before I started the video. But he and Aunt Ruth have created a legacy that will last for generations. And I'm so proud to be able to give this gift to him, to walk through a fantastic year of his youth, the 1948 Braves, a team that is special to all of us. And again, Uncle Ralph, happy birthday. And for our viewers, if you could leave a message in the comments. 100 years birthdays don't come around very often, and they certainly don't come around for me very often. I don't know if I've ever had a family member who lived to the age of 100, but if you could leave a comment. And we'll be back next week with another episode. And it won't be as special, but it'll hopefully will be good. So take care. Have a great day and Happy New Year.